Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're embarking on an epic, truly cinematic global journey into the making of the world's longest written constitution. For all you focused learners out there, especially the UPSC and law aspirants tuning in, get ready. We are going to explore exactly how the framers of the Indian Constitution studied centuries of global history, carefully selected the absolute best ideas, and then modified them to fit the very unique realities of India.
But first, we really have to address the elephant in the room. You have probably heard the common critique at some point. Is the Indian Constitution just a quote-unquote bag of borrowings? Like, is it just some massive copy-paste job from the rest of the world? Well, as we'll see today, that couldn't be further from the truth. The framers definitely weren't plagiarists. They were master architects. They didn't just borrow ideas, they adapted, they modified, and they synthesized a completely bespoke framework.
So here's our roadmap for this journey. 1. The blueprint. 2. The pillars. 3. Federal dynamics. 4. Global ideals. And 5. The unique Indian synthesis. Let's dive in.
Section 1. The Blueprint, the Government of India Act 1935. So the framers actually took the core structural part of the Constitution directly from the Government of India Act of 1935. Now you might be wondering, why do that? Well, think about it. India was a newly independent, highly fragile nation at the time. They deliberately chose this incredibly detailed administrative blueprint because they wanted to prevent a dangerous constitutional vacuum, and they really needed to stabilize the post-colonial state. They took the federal scheme, the structure of the judiciary, the public service commissions, all directly from this act. It was literally the skeleton upon which everything else we're about to discuss was built.
Section 2. The pillars, the United Kingdom and the United States. Okay, looking at the United Kingdom first. Yes, for sure, we borrowed their parliamentary government, the cabinet system, and the rule of law. We had native familiarity with these British institutions, so that made sense. But notice the brilliant yes but technique the framers used here. We firmly rejected parliamentary sovereignty, which is the idea that Parliament has absolute unchecked power, and we completely dismissed the hereditary monarchy, opting instead for a republic headed by an elected president.
And to effectively balance that parliamentary power, we looked across the pond to the United States. We borrowed heavily from the U.S. to secure individual liberties through fundamental rights, and we established an independent judiciary, equipped with the power of judicial review. For those mapping this out, this was absolutely crucial. It basically meant the courts could check the executive and legislative branches, guaranteeing that citizen rights were actually protected against government overreach.
Section 3. Federal dynamics. Canada and Australia.
Now, the really crucial point here is understanding this specific definition. Scholars like Casey Weir called India quasi-federal, while Granville Austin famously labeled it cooperative federalism. Basically, it's a system that creates a dual polity. That means both the Union and the states draw their authority directly from the Constitution. However, it leans heavily toward a strong centralized union government. To really grasp why we went that route, contrast the US and Canadian models. The US is a coming-together federation, right? Independent states integrated but kept residuary powers for themselves. But India, facing severe partition anxieties and secessionist threats, actually mirrored the Canadian model. It was formed through the disintegration of a unitary colonial state. Because of that, we desperately needed a strong center. So we vested the residuary powers in the Union to preserve national unity and integrity above absolutely everything else.
And to make this complex federal system function smoothly across such a vast subcontinent, we looked down under to Australia. We borrowed the concurrent list, which is this genius idea that allows both the center and states to make laws on shared subjects, think education or criminal law. That ensures legal unity without completely crushing local, regional needs. We also adopted their mechanisms for the freedom of trade across borders, as well as joint sittings of Parliament to resolve those tricky bicameral deadlocks.
Section 4. Global ideals, rights, duties, and emergencies.
This right here is where you see a truly breathtaking global synthesis. From Ireland, we took the directive principles of state policy, basically a socioeconomic blueprint for building a welfare state. From the USSR, we incorporated fundamental duties and the core ideals of justice found in our preamble. From France, we adopted the revolutionary, world-changing ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And from the Weimar Republic of Germany, we actually learned a pretty harsh historical lesson. We adopted the power to suspend fundamental rights during an emergency to protect the sovereignty of the state during extreme existential crises.
We complete this global tour with Japan and South Africa. Japan heavily influenced Article 21 with the concept of procedure established by law, which essentially limits judicial intervention in state-led social reforms. And South Africa, they inspired our constitutional amendment process. By requiring a two-thirds majority, the framers struck a perfect balance between rigidity and flexibility. That is exactly what keeps our Constitution a living, breathing document today, rather than just some rigid historical relic.
Section 5. The unique Indian synthesis.
Okay, the ultimate genius of the Indian framers lies right here. They didn't want the British system where the Parliament sits as an absolute, unchecked supreme power. Nor did they want the American system where the courts are ultimately supreme. Instead, they charted a brilliant middle path: constitutional supremacy. The Parliament absolutely can amend the Constitution, but the Supreme Court has the power of judicial review to strike down unconstitutional laws. It is a dynamic, carefully engineered balance of power.
And honestly, nobody encapsulated this better than the chairman of the drafting committee himself, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, stated, "The Constitution avoids the tight mold of federalism and could be both unitary as well as federal, according to the requirements of time and circumstances." He designed an adaptable, bespoke architecture. Again, it was not a rigid copy. It was a highly sophisticated machine designed specifically for the Indian reality.
Which leaves us with this final, pretty profound question to consider today. How is this brilliant capability to adapt, functioning so smoothly as a federation in times of peace, yet capable of transforming seamlessly into a unitary state during a crisis, allowed India to survive and truly thrive as a vibrant democracy for over 75 years? It's a massive testament to the fact that the Indian Constitution isn't just a document. It's a dynamic, living synthesis of the world's absolute greatest democratic ideas. Think about how this unmatched flexibility continues to shape the world's largest democracy today. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.